U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran have raised one immediate question: is the Strait of Hormuz open? I'm your host, Salaglano. Early this morning, the United States, Israel, and several allied nations launched coordinated strikes across Iranian territory. Iran has responded with attacks on land-based facilities, and tensions are rising quickly throughout the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf of Oman. There's a great deal unfolding right now. And while many analysts will focus on military strategy and political consequences, our focus here will remain squarely on global shipping and maritime trade. This channel does not dive into political debate. We're not here to argue whether these strikes were justified or not. Others will cover air campaigns, missile trajectories, and diplomatic fallout. My concern is shipping, how vessels are moving, whether trade continues, and what disruptions may follow. As a former merchant mariner turned academic specializing in maritime history and analysis, I approach this strictly from the shipping perspective. Today, we'll break down what's happening and give you the tools to determine for yourself whether the Strait of Hormuz remains operational. For those new to the channel, consider subscribing and enabling notifications so you're alerted when updates are posted. Now, let's begin with reporting from G-Captain, a must-follow outlet for global maritime developments. I'll reference several shipping resources today, but much of the initial reporting comes from there for clarity and consistency. According to coverage, U.S. and Israeli forces began striking targets across Iran, with President Donald Trump urging Iranians to challenge their government during an 8-minute address outlining strategic objectives. In that speech, President Trump also referenced targeting the Iranian Navy and emphasized safeguarding international shipping. He traced tensions back to 1979, citing Iran's actions against the United States, including incidents during the Iraq War involving improvised explosive devices. The year 1979 is significant not only due to the Iranian Revolution but also because it preceded the Iran-Iraq War and the so-called Tanker War. Between 1980 and 1988, approximately 450 tankers were struck by Iranian and Iraqi forces. Hundreds of merchant mariners lost their lives during that prolonged and dangerous conflict. Yet despite 8 years of open warfare, the Strait of Hormuz never fully closed. Shipping continued, even under extreme threat. That historical precedent is important as we evaluate today's developments. Another report from G-Captain highlights warnings from Yemen's Houthi movement, signaling a possible resumption of Red Sea attacks following the strikes on Iran. The maritime security environment across the Middle East deteriorated sharply, particularly around the Red Sea, after months of relative pause in commercial shipping disruptions in that corridor. This comes just days after several shipping firms cautiously announced limited returns to Red Sea routes. Among them was Maersk, which had begun re-entering the region in a restricted capacity. However, 2 days ago, Maersk reversed course and confirmed it was pulling vessels back out. Concerns over the newly launched operation, reportedly named Operation Epic Fury, appear to have influenced that decision. Regardless of the name, the operational impact is clear. Uncertainty is once again driving major carriers away from high-risk zones. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy declared a broad maritime warning zone around the Persian Gulf. This announcement unsettled global energy markets and prompted major oil companies to reconsider shipments through one of the world's most vital choke points. The central question now is whether traffic continues to move through the Strait of Hormuz. The answer requires examining real-time vessel tracking data and official advisories issued by maritime authorities monitoring the evolving security landscape. Using AIS data from vessel tracking systems such as marine traffic, we can observe ship positions in near real time. It's important to note that AIS signals can be switched off, and spoofing does occur. meaning not every vessel may be visible or accurately represented. Still, the current feed shows noticeably lighter traffic in the Strait of Hormuz compared to typical flows. Normally, red markers, tankers, and green markers, cargo vessels, move steadily through the narrow channel connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. Anchorages off Fujairah and near the UAE are usually filled with vessels awaiting berth clearance inside the Gulf. On average, roughly 750 commercial ships operate within the Persian Gulf at any given time. Playback data from late February shows consistent tanker movement. However, recent strikes appear to have caused hesitation. Ships have slowed or paused, though traffic has not fully stopped. During peak attack hours, some vessels continue transit, reflecting how shipping decisions often lag behind rapidly changing geopolitical events. A reported warning, allegedly from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, declared the strait closed to all vessels. However, such broadcasts do not automatically translate into legal closure under international maritime law. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Office clarified that unilateral declarations lack binding authority under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Ships retain the right of innocent passage provided they are not engaging in hostile acts. Legally speaking, nothing formally bars commercial vessels from transiting the Strait of Hormuz. That said, legal rights and physical risks are separate matters. The Persian Gulf functions like a maritime cul-de-sac. There is no alternative route for oil exports from Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, or the UAE. Unlike the Red Sea, where vessels can reroute around Africa, there is no bypass here. Even a restricted flow, not a full closure, could strain global oil markets. At present, no confirmed widespread attacks on merchant shipping have occurred, though isolated incidents are being investigated. The U.S. Maritime Administration issued guidance advising American-flagged vessels to maintain distance from military ships and coordinate closely with naval command structures. Similarly, UK authorities warned mariners to remain vigilant. Monitor VHF Channel 16, and prepare for potential electronic interference. Spoofing and GPS disruption are real threats in this environment. While advisory zones aim to reduce misidentification risks, merchant crews face the delicate balance of staying clear of military targets while seeking protection if danger escalates. Another key variable is war risk insurance. Shipping companies weigh not only physical danger but also the financial burden of additional premiums. The Joint War Committee at the Lloyd's Market Association designates high-risk areas requiring added coverage. The Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz already fall into this category. However, premiums may rise sharply if tensions escalate. During the 1980s tanker war risk insurance reportedly surged to nearly 10% of vessel value, an extraordinary cost burden for operators. For consumers in Canada and the United States, what does this mean at the fuel pump? Analysts such as Patrick Dehaan at GasBuddy suggest that oil prices will react first, with gasoline adjustments following. Volatility is expected, but dramatic spikes are unlikely unless the situation worsens significantly. Current fundamentals do not resemble the severe disruptions seen during the 2022 Russia-Ukraine crisis. Short-term increases, if any, may amount to cents rather than dollars, though markets remain sensitive to further escalation. Beyond pump prices lies the broader tanker market. There is a finite global fleet of crude carriers. Recent U.S. seizures of sanctioned vessels, particularly those linked to Venezuelan oil shipments, have already constrained supply. At least 10 tankers have been detained, with legal proceedings initiated against the first. Additionally, sanctions on Russian exports and European Union coordination with G7 partners are tightening maritime service restrictions, further shrinking the pool of available vessels in compliant trade. Meanwhile, aggressive fleet acquisitions by firms such as Sunoco Merchant Marine, reportedly backed in part by Mediterranean shipping interests, have concentrated control of very large crude carriers. Charter rates have surged beyond $100,000 per day, with some voyages commanding over $150,000 daily. When geopolitical risk meets constrained fleet availability, freight rates climb rapidly. The tanker market was already under strain before these strikes. Now, pressure is intensifying. Russia and Iran are also competing more aggressively for Chinese buyers as Indian imports shift under U.S. pressure. If India reduces Russian purchases significantly, both Moscow and Tehran may discount crude to retain market share in China. Such pricing battles ripple through freight demand and vessel deployment. At the same time, European policymakers are advancing maritime service bans targeting Russian seaborne oil, adding another regulatory layer to an already fragmented global tanker system. Given all this, could Iran realistically close the Strait of Hormuz? A complete shutdown would be extremely difficult to sustain. However, even intermittent disruption, a pinched flow, could tighten supply and drive price swings. Remember, it's not only Iranian oil moving through this corridor. Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the UAE depend heavily on these waters. Any interference affects the broader Gulf export ecosystem, not just one nation. One final indicator worth watching is U.S. strategic sealift activity. During large-scale conflicts such as 1990's Desert Shield and Desert Storm, the Ready Reserve Force was activated to transport ground forces. Today, most reserve vessels remain docked in the continental United States, suggesting no imminent large-scale ground invasion. Current operations appear focused on airstrikes rather than troop deployment. Prepositioned assets in Kuwait or Bahrain could support limited missions, but no major mobilization is visible. In summary, the Strait of Hormuz remains legally open, though traffic has thinned amid heightened risk. War risk premiums may climb. Tanker rates are already surging. And energy markets are watching closely. While this appears to be a targeted air campaign rather than a ground war, maritime trade will feel its effects. I'll continue monitoring vessel movement, insurance developments, and naval advisories, providing updates as events unfold, because when it comes to global shipping, the Strait of Hormuz matters to us all.